Right now, President Biden is meeting with King Charles III. It is the first time the two are meeting since the king's coronation in May. And it comes ahead of the high-stakes NATO summit in Lithuania this week. This morning, the president held talks with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in Downing Street. Well, CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang has more from Windsor, England.
Here at Windsor Castle, President Biden and King Charles focused on climate change over tea, but the bulk of this trip is about the war in Ukraine. Before the president left the U.S., he made clear that he doesn't think it's the right time for Ukraine to join NATO. He's also defending a controversial decision to send weapons to the country that are banned in much of the world. A day before the high-stakes NATO summit, President Biden met Monday with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at 10 Downing Street.
It's a great pleasure to have you here. It's
good to be back.
Allied divisions over the war in Ukraine are set to take front and center at the summit, as President Biden defends his decision to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine.
It was a very difficult decision on my part.
A weapon opposed by human rights groups and banned by over 100 countries, including the UK.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use.
Mr. Biden said Ukraine needs the canisters, filled with small bombs that can be dropped over a wide area.
I think they needed them. This is a war relating to munitions. And they're running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it.
Some Democrats warn duds from the cluster bombs could hurt innocent civilians.
They don't always immediately explode. Children can step on them. That's a line we should not cross.
One line the president doesn't seem ready to cross is the push to allow Ukraine to join NATO.
I don't think it's ready for membership in NATO.
President Biden said that the war must end before Ukraine is admitted, fearing all members would be dragged into conflict with Russia.
If the war is going on, then we're all in a war. You know, we're at war with Russia, if that were the case.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine prompted Sweden and Finland, two historically neutral countries, to apply to NATO. But Sweden's effort has been blocked by Turkey and Hungary. Turkey is objecting to Sweden's push to join NATO over concerns that Stockholm is not cracking down on groups that it considers to be terrorists. President Biden is heavily involved in negotiations to try to change Turkey's mind, speaking with the president yesterday and planning to follow up in person during the NATO summit. Anne-Marie?
Weijia, thank you. So I want to bring in Nigel Fletcher now to talk a little bit more about Biden's European trip. He's a political historian at King's College in London. Nigel, glad to have you here with us.
Good to be with you.
The president called the relationship between the U.S. and the U.K., quote, rock solid. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is the leader of the Conservative Party in Britain. So one might think that their political perspectives may be a little bit different, but they seem to share a lot of commonalities, I guess. Can you describe what the current dynamic is between the two men?
Yes, and I think it's true to say that the relationship between President Biden and recent British Prime Ministers may have been a little strained. We had Boris Johnson, of course, and then a brief interlude of Liz Truss, with whom I think the relationship was a little strained. I think Rishi Sunak, in some ways, is perhaps more suited to Biden's outlook. Rishi Sunak, of course, has met him many times in the last few months. They've had, it just happens, they've had various meetings over the last 5 months and are quite familiar with each other. Rishi Sunak, of course, has a home in America. He's very comfortable in the United States. And so I think on a personal level, I think there's a pretty good working relationship there. I think today the focus is on the things they agree on. So that's why we're seeing at Windsor today the focus on climate change, for example. Quite unusual to see the King being brought in to a political issue like that, but it's one on which I think Rishi Sunak and the President are fairly well aligned. So we've had a lot of talk about that. We've had a lot of talk about the Atlantic Declaration, things like that they agree on, and a bit less about the things that they disagree on.
So then I got to ask you, will they be talking about the president's decision to send, or America's decision to send cluster munitions to Ukraine? This is an area of disagreement in terms of using this kind of weaponry. But of course, the war in Ukraine is dragging on longer than anyone would like to see. And the counteroffensive by Ukraine doesn't seem to be as effective as many has hoped.
Yes, it's quite rare during this conflict to find such a significant difference between the approach taken by the two allies, between the US and the UK. Cluster munitions, of course, there is a substantive difference because the UK is a signatory to the International Convention on banning them. And so we're being told that this morning Rishi Sunak did raise the issue with the president because the United Kingdom is under an obligation to campaign against their use. So we're told it was brought up this morning, but I doubt it was a significant part of their conversation. They both know that they have a difference of opinion on that, a different position on it. I don't think it would have taken a huge amount of their talks. And of course, they're about to meet at the NATO summit where those kind of issues, I'm sure, will be discussed in more depth. So it's a very brief stopover in the UK. I think that this meeting in Downing Street this morning really was more of a courtesy in order for them to sort of catch up, although they have seen each other quite a bit recently. And of course, they'll have further talks at the summit. But yeah, it's quite unusual, really, to have two substantive items on which the UK and the US are disagreeing. One is on NATO membership for Ukraine and the other on supply of weapons. But I think from what we've seen, they are trying to keep the focus on keeping a united front on their approach to Ukraine and on other issues like, as I say, climate change, which is the subject of the current meeting at Windsor at the moment.
Right, because as we know, despite the fact that he's king now, Prince Charles certainly was very interested in this topic. This was an area where he spoke a lot about. I'm curious about the relationship between President Biden and King Charles III. The president didn't attend the coronation. Nothing personal. American presidents don't attend coronations, British coronations. That being said, both men have been kind of public figures for quite a long time. Have they met before? Do they have a relationship?
Yes, and of course, President Biden, having been vice president before, will have met the king when he was Prince of Wales. They certainly have that kind of a relationship going back a few years. It's quite unusual on a visit like this for the sovereign, for the king to be involved in what is actually quite a political discussion about how we approach climate change. But I think that's one of the differences we're seeing with the king, a difference to his late mother, is that he is going to continue on some of those issues that we know he has strong opinions on. So certainly on that, I think he and the president will have a lot to talk about and will be in agreement.
Yeah. Nigel, Fletcher, thank you very much.
Thank you.